Now, if you were with us 2 days ago at this time, for perspective, we previewed the US elections on Election Day by talking to US domestic and foreign policy specialist Laurie Dundon. Her insight was so valuable that we've invited her back once again to digest why Donald Trump won and what went wrong for Kamala Harris. Good to have you with us once again, Laurie. Why did then Donald Trump, do you think, win this election?
If I had to sum it up, I'd say kind of death by a thousand cuts. Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party just kind of had one too many hurdles to reach. Joe Biden pulling out very late in the game created only about a 3-month window for Harris to be able to introduce herself to the people, to the wide nation of voters, to get her message out, but to also to hone that message, to spend the time at the podium working a stump speech so that it wasn't just about I will do more for you on the economy, but how I will do it, what I will do, convincing people to vote for her, and I think even more so, creating a brand. And Trump had that. Trump has been on the stage for 9 years. His team has become more disciplined, even while he's on the stage doing the standard Trump, talking all over the place, and many of his comments weaving around inconsistently or being even quite offensive. His team was much more disciplined this time. The party was much more disciplined, and they were known. It was known what he stood for. Harris had a short window between Biden dropping out mid-July, convention in mid-August, and voting even starting mid-September.
So from what you're saying, it sounds like you think it was more about the spectacle, if you like, of Trump rather than either the policies of Donald Trump or the policies of Kamala Harris.
Excuse me, I missed.
I was saying, from what you're saying, it sounds like it was more the spectacle of Donald Trump as a figure, as a person, as a machine, rather than policies on either side?
Well, I think policy, fundamentally, if we try to break it down of why voters chose his brand, I think that's a large part of it comes down to the economy. I mean, we saw the first exit polls that Harris voters demonstrating that one of their first motivations for why they chose their candidate was democracy, was the individual and the character of Donald Trump and the dangers of him being unhinged and unchecked, as she warned in her final messages. And following that would be things like the economy, things like climate change, things like even the abortion issue, which was not necessarily number one for a lot of voters. But on Trump, economy, economy, economy. His combination of a campaign of fear tactics, the immigrants are coming for you, type, shorthand, security, I will protect you, and economy, I will fix it. We can't underestimate how much the American people have been feeling the pressure of inflation and price hikes over the last few years. This isn't just the last few months. This has been now a few years in the post-COVID recovery, economic recovery. And that frustration had to go somewhere.
Was Harris just too weak on the economy, do you think? And do you think Joe Biden is partially to blame? I mean, he's been in charge for the last nearly 4 years.
Exactly. Well, responsible for causing the economic stress? No. A lot of this is the reaction coming out of the fallout from the COVID economy that he inherited in coming into office in 2021. And by all metrics, they did a fairly good job managing through that, ensuring that the U.S. didn't fall into a further recession, even getting strong numbers in job growth, as strong numbers on the stock market. But that's not what American citizens felt. And you're right, Harris was associated with the period with being a continuation of Bidenomics, if you could say. And that message so often coming from the White House was, I hear that there's inflation problems. I know there's inflation problems for you, but look, it's not really that bad. And after hearing that for multiple years, Americans, I think even more, felt there was a disconnect between Washington, the White House, President Biden, and then all that Harris stood for.
What do you think comes next? I mean, Joe Biden, he's got a couple of weeks literally left, really, hasn't he? I mean, is there anything he can do to try and ensure that some of his policies, some of the things that he's fought for example, aid to Ukraine, other issues as well, can be pushed through, can be shored up a little bit before he departs the Oval Office?
The good news is, I think a lot of the government teams and policy leaders under Biden have already been anticipating for a while that they need to have just in case measures. And so the things like pushing a very large package of aid for Ukraine this past summer wasn't surprising. They, knew this could be their last chance. That a number of policymakers in the State Department and Defense Department and economic and trade issues are trying to do as much as possible to lock in programs that could almost run on automatic pilot, because you don't quite know how far Trump will go on some of the promises he'd made and how much systemic kind of bureaucratic procedures can keep things from going too far in implementation. And you don't know what he's going to do, in the next few days of announcing something. These things just come out of the blue. But there's a lot of prep to try and put in place as much regulatory much regulatory controls as much as possible. Automatic delivery of, for example, the Ukraine assistance, things like that have been approved could drag on for about a year in terms of implementation, even if there are new decisions.
And what about from the Donald Trump side? I mean, we're due to start getting some names probably coming through of who he's decided he's going to have on his top team. That's first on the agenda, I suppose. And what about those legal processes? I mean, presumably they're all pretty much dead in the water now.
Seems like it. The case in Florida that was the federal indictment against him mishandling confidential materials, national security material, was already dismissed. He was due for sentencing in some of his case in New York, where he was already found guilty on 34 counts. But that may or may not happen. The sentencing may not come to pass. He's already said he will take action to ensure he is not held accountable for the indictment associated with the January 6th escalation. And there's very little chance that new action would be taken against him, given that the Supreme Court validated this summer that an acting president, has immunity.
And it's pretty certain now, isn't it, that Donald Trump's going to be able to do whatever he wants, isn't it? I mean, he's already got control of the Senate. He's likely, anyway, from the latest figures, probably to get control of the House of Representatives as well.
Absolutely. This is going to be a lot more freedom than he had in the first term, and he will be much more unchecked. That's also likely going to be a factor in who he chooses to work in his team, because in the first term of office, there was a phrase that he was being controlled or semi-managed by the adults in the room. He would make a statement about pulling troops out of an area or pulling out troops out of Afghanistan suddenly in the next weeks, and his team would kind of walk that back to be more cautious and more realistic. Now, he's pushed back on the military as well as civilian bureaucrats and said, that's part of the deep state. I don't want them altering my agenda. And they've already talked about putting in place loyalty tests for senior military officials. They've talked about reviewing the loyalty of civilian permanent bureaucratic employees. There's likely going to be a lot more unanimous action. A lot more uncontrolled action coming out of the executive authorities of the White House.
Laurie Dundon, good to talk to you once again here on the programme. US domestic and foreign policy specialist Laurie Dundon, summing up after the election, after we spoke to her a couple of days ago to preview it. Thanks once again for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.